The three bright blue stars that make up Orion's belt look pretty small up in the night sky, but actually blue stars are some of the most massive and brightest stars in the whole universe. Stars burn hydrogen for fuel, and blue stars have a lot of hydrogen. Our sun has enough hydrogen to keep burning for around 10 billion years. Blue stars have much more than that, but they won't last as long because they burn through it so much faster. Many blue stars shine 200 times brighter than our sun because they burn their fuel so quickly. Blue stars are like SUVs. They have a big gas tank, but very poor mileage, and they illuminate all parts of the night sky. How do so many short-lived stars exist in a universe that is supposedly 13.8 billion years old? Secular scientists think that stars constantly form as a result of gas clouds being compressed together, even though none of them have ever seen this. Plus, gas particles and clouds bounce against one another. This outward force far exceeds the inward pulling force of gravity. Blue stars churn through their own fuel so fast that they cannot last billions of years. And based on their observed luminosity, the most massive blue stars cannot last even 1 million years before running out of fuel. If the universe is 13.8 billion years old, as secularists claim, blue stars should not be here anymore. But they are, and we find them all throughout the universe. As God said through his prophet Isaiah, "My hands stretched out the heavens, and all their host I have commanded." Blue stars fit perfectly with the Bible's idea of recent creation. So, next time you see a blue star, think of our Creator, whose hands created the whole universe.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting our Defending Creation seminar, and this time it's titled Design in Astronomy and DNA. And you can join us every Sunday here at Hanover Grace Presbyterian Church in Hanover, PA, from 4 to 5 p.m. Also, these lessons will be recorded and available on the Grace Presbyterian Hanover YouTube channel. So in Series 1, Design in Astronomy, we'll start today with Lesson 1, our Created Stars and Galaxies. Next week, we'll talk about our Created Solar System, Part 1, and that'll address the terrestrial planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. The following week, we'll go out to the gas giants like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Lesson 4, we'll talk about the trans-Neptunian objects, or TNOs, and that includes Pluto, which was downgraded from a planet. And we'll also talk about comets. Lesson 5 will address the Big Bang, exploding the myth. Lesson 6, we'll talk about distant starlight, but it's not a problem for a young universe. Then Series 2 will discuss DNA and aliens. Lesson 7, Replacing Darwinism, The New Origins of Species, Part 1. Lesson 8, New Origins of Species, Part 2. And this is from Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson, who has done research on DNA and how our mutations have increased through each generation. And if you go back in time, you can time it to Noah's sons and daughters, and you can even go back further to Adam and Eve. And the final lesson in this seminar series is Alien Intrusion, Unmasking the Deception. What are aliens all about? And we'll discuss that in depth. So today's lesson, our Created Stars and Galaxies. Today's outline will talk about cosmological evolution, star and galaxy formation based on evolution. Point number 2, 3 purposes of the heavens based on the Bible. Point number 3, what is the message of the heavens? Which model fits the universe better, biblical creation or evolution? Point number 4, the spiritual message of the heavens. We'll compare atheists and naturalists versus the Christian viewpoint. I'm using clips in this presentation, 2 videos. One is entitled Astronomy, Created Stars and Galaxies by Spike Pizarris. He was previously an engineer in the United States military space program. He entered that program as an atheist and an evolutionist, and he left it as a creation and a Christian. And you can actually access his video at his website at creationastronomy.com. The second video I'll use clips from is entitled Astronomy Reveals Creation by Dr. Jason Lisle. Dr. Lisle is a PhD in astrophysics at the University of Colorado in Boulder. There he used the SOHO spacecraft to analyze the surface of the sun. So what does the Bible teach about the universe? Let's start in the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And it reads, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." So in Genesis 1:1, we see the start of time. In the beginning, heaven is space and earth is matter. So we have time, space, and matter created by God. On day 4, the stars were made, and we find this in Genesis chapter 1, verse 16. In the beginning of that verse, it says, "And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day," which is the sun, "and the lesser light to rule the night." And it also says he made the stars also. It's almost like no big deal. The vast universe out there, God just made it day 4, and to him it was not that much of a challenge. It's pretty amazing. So let's talk about the cosmological evolution. But first, let's look at biological evolution. That's life. That's goo to you through the zoo. Where biological evolution says we came from primordial slime to sea creatures, to land creatures, to apes, to eventually man. We covered that in Defending Creation in the first series. The next evolution is geological evolution, or the Earth with the layers. And we talked about that in the first Defending Creation series, where it wasn't evolution, it was the great flood that caused all the layers. And if you want to see more of that, you can go back to the lessons from earlier this year and late last year. This series is focused exclusively, especially the first half, on cosmological evolution, planets, stars, and galaxies. So why do we talk cosmological evolution? Well, if you look at the astronomy textbooks dating from 1994 to 2013, what do you see? You see all evolution. So evolution and astronomy are tied together. So the Big Bang. Cosmological evolution teaches the Big Bang happened 13.7 or 13.8 billion years ago. And that model teaches the universe started out as a hot and dense point which suddenly ballooned in size and eventually expanded to the size it is today. But the early universe only had hydrogen and helium clouds and had nothing in it but hydrogen and helium gas. Eventually the gas began to clump together. Within the clumps there were areas of higher density, and those areas began to contract under the influence of gravity. As the clouds contracted, the gas was compacted and heated up. Eventually the gas was squeezing in on itself so tightly that nuclear fusion ignited deep inside, and this was the first star. First stars appeared about 13.2 billion years ago. Then other stars began to turn on the early universe. And galaxies began to appear about 8 to 11 billion years ago, according to evolution. And as stars formed, they gathered into clusters of galaxies. Exactly how this happened is still controversial. Most secular astronomers would agree that stars merged into clusters, clusters merged into galaxies, and galaxies merged to become bigger galaxies. And our galaxy is the Milky Way, and it formed somewhere between 7 to 8 billion years ago. And our solar system formed about 4 to 6 billion years ago. And that's when our sun began to form, when a cloud of gas and dust collapsed. The planets of our solar system formed from the same cloud, including the Earth. So the Big Bang Theory teaches that everything started either as a small dot, a cosmic egg, or nothing, and that exploded 13.7 to 8 billion years ago. It first created hydrogen and helium clouds. Eventually, stars formed 10 to 13 billion years ago. The first stars exploded into supernovas, and those new stars formed after the explosions, and you got the heavier elements. And then eventually our solar system began 4 to 6 billion years ago. So let's talk more about star formation. So where is the star formation region? A nebula is a giant cloud of dust and gas in space, and some nebula come from the gas and dust thrown out by an explosion of a dying star, such as a supernova. This is a picture of the Mystic Mountain part of the Carina Nebula. You can see the picture here. We are told that there are many locations of star formation like this nebula. Evolutionists like to point to regions like this for support of their model. It is a logical fallacy. Whether or not stars are forming in the universe today, or whether they could form in the universe today, is really not the question. If the universe formed itself without a creator being involved, would we see stars today? And the answer is no. So let's talk about gas pressure. Gas pressure is actually stronger than gravity. In the Big Bang model, stars are supposed to form from clouds of gas as gravity squeezed the gas together. But there's a problem. A cloud of gas in space will not collapse to stars on its own, because gravity is a weak force and much weaker than gas pressure, which forces the gas molecules apart. I want to demonstrate this. I have a can of compressed air up here. It's just a duster that you can use to move the dust from a keyboard, okay? So when I pull the trigger, it opens a passage from outside the can to inside the can. So what happens when the gas can travel freely? Here, I'll show you. Hear that? The gas comes out because gas always disperses from areas of higher pressure inside the can to areas of lower pressure outside the can. Okay? Question: how much gas would you need to inside the can to create such a strong gravitational force that when I pulled the trigger, gas wouldn't come out of the can? Instead, all the air in the room would get sucked into the can and we would all asphyxiate and die. This is the kind of concentration of gas that you would need to form stars from a gas cloud in space. You can't maintain a cloud of gas at higher pressure than its surroundings unless you keep it in a container of some kind like this. This can is a container, so the gas stays inside without dispersing. But there aren't many containers in space, so there's nothing that prevents gas clouds in space from dissipating. So there are other things that will prevent a gas cloud from collapsing into stars. One evolutionist wrote, "We know the cloud wants to collapse under its own weight to make one or more stars, but rotation as well as turbulent motion within the cloud work against that fate. So too does the ordinary gas pressure you learned about in high school chemistry class." So this is Neil deGrasse Tyson who wrote this. Galactic magnetic fields also fight collapse. They'll penetrate the cloud, latch onto any free-roaming charged particles contained therein, restricting the ways in which the cloud will respond to its self-gravity. So, how can stars exist? So stars are much denser and smaller than gas clouds in space. Stars more compressed. The gas cloud is so expansive. It's like it could be several light years apart. And gravity is stronger at higher densities and smaller distances. If there's enough gas in a small enough volume, gravity then can be strong enough to overcome the gas pressure. This is why stars are stable, though they're made of mostly gas. So interstellar gas clouds are too large and diffuse for gravity to overcome that gas pressure. Therefore, the gas clouds will not collapse and form stars, but disperse instead. Evolutionists know this is true, so how do they explain it? I'm going to play a video where Spike talks about how the seculars explain how do we get this dispersing gas with pressure to come back together and form into stars. And he'll go over the different scenarios that I'll play here.
First, they suggest that compression can overcome gas pressure and allow stars to form. The compression would come from a supernova. Supernovae are tremendous explosions in space. For a short time, they can produce as much energy as an entire galaxy. They're incredibly violent. For example, the Crab Nebula is the remnant of a supernova that occurred in the year 1054. This supernova was so bright that it was visible during the daytime for more than 3 weeks. Supernovae are thought to trigger star formation when one explodes close to a gas cloud. This creates a shock front, which compresses the cloud, overcoming the gas pressure. Gravity then takes over and compresses the cloud further, and stars begin to form. The second explanation is cooling. When a supernova occurs, it might also inject dust grains and particles into the cloud, or the grains can get there from other ways. The dust cools down the cloud, which reduces gas pressure and again allows stars to form. A third possibility is collisions, where the gas cloud gets compressed when something else collides with it. This can occur when galaxies collide with each other, as you see in this example here. A fourth possible explanation comes from black holes. Some evolutionists suggest that black holes emit jets of high-speed material, which crash into gas clouds and trigger star formation. A final possibility is that radiation from a cluster of newborn stars can trigger star formation within nearby gas clouds. So evolutionists have several explanations for star formation today. But notice something important about these explanations. They all require stars to exist before more stars can be made. Supernovae occur when old stars explode. According to the Big Bang model, interstellar dust grains also come from existing stars. The model can't account for them otherwise. Black holes are thought to form when massive stars run out of fuel or have certain other things happen to them. And before galaxies can collide, they first have to exist, and they're made up of stars too. The same is true for radiation from newborn stars. This is a huge problem for the secular model. The Big Bang can't make any stars until stars already exist. It's like the classic riddle of the chicken and the egg. You need chickens to make eggs, and you need eggs to make chickens. The Big Bang model has this problem on a much larger scale, a universal scale. It can't make stars until stars were already made.
So after considering all these star formation problems that he went out to the different four, you can see why the evolutionists say things like this. The origin of stars represents one of the most fundamental unsolved problems of contemporary astrophysics. There are so many uncertainties in this picture that at present we do not really have a theory of star formation. If stars did not exist, it would be easy to prove that this is what we expect. Literally hundreds of ideas on how stars are formed have been advanced in the past decades. However, we are still far from any real solution. We are starting from a shaky foundation. We don't understand how a single star forms, yet we want to understand how 10 billion stars form. If none of us knew in advance that stars exist, frontline research would offer plenty of convincing reasons why stars could never form. So the next time you're out looking at the night sky, maybe tonight because it'll be clear, remember the following. All the stars you see, and the billions more you don't see, you need telescopes, all defy the evolutionary model just by existing. Now, they do have what's called rescuing devices, and they introduce what's called dark matter and dark energy. And I'll play this video for a couple minutes, and Spike will talk about that.
They'll say this problem has been solved because there were some announcements recently that claimed that it was. For example, here's a report about a computer simulation that supposedly showed how the very first star could form. And here's another. But here's what they aren't telling you. These simulations all require something called dark matter. And if you ask an evolutionist what dark matter is, they'll tell you they don't know. Many astronomers believe that there's a lot of stuff in the universe that we can't see. There's supposed to be a huge amount of it, 5 times as much as all the stars and galaxies and everything else that we do see in space. But if you ask where all this matter is, they'll tell you it's invisible. It emits no light. It emits no radio waves. It emits no X-rays or infrared radiation. It's unlike everything else we know. But it must exist, or else their models don't work. For now, I just want to point out that in order to explain where the first stars came from, evolutionists have to invoke things that nobody has ever seen and that nobody has any idea what it is or how it works. As a cosmologist recently told the BBC, "We don't know what the dark matter is. We don't know what the first stars are. If we bring these two problems together, when we know more about one, then we can say something about the other." Well, that doesn't work. Being ignorant about two things at the same time doesn't teach you anything about either one. If we don't know what dark matter is, how it works, where it came from, whether or not it could even have been formed by the alleged Big Bang, how it behaves, whether or not it interacts with ordinary matter outside of gravity, or anything else, then how can we make it part of a scientific model? The only reason dark matter can supposedly rescue star formation for the evolutionists is because nobody knows what it is, or has any definitive evidence for how it might work. So evolutionists are putting it in their models and claiming it can do all sorts of wonderful things because nobody can prove that it can't do all these wonderful things. But that's not how science is supposed to work. And even then, scientists have realized that not even dark matter can rescue the Big Bang from all its problems. So evolutionists also believe in something called dark energy. Together, dark matter and dark energy must be about 96% of the universe, where the Big Bang model can't work. But neither dark matter nor dark energy has a solid basis in physics. As the director of the Canadian Institute for Theoretical Astrophysics said, "We know the total matter content of the universe. It's 4%. That's the stuff we recognize as matter. The rest is something we don't understand." There was an article in the New York Times that talked about this. It talked about how the Big Bang cosmology depends on dark matter and dark energy. The article asked, "What is dark energy anyway?" And then it said, "The difficulty in answering that question has led some cosmologists to ask an even deeper question. Does dark energy even exist? Or is it perhaps an inference too far?" Cosmologists have another saying they like to cite. You get to invoke the tooth fairy only once, meaning dark matter. But now we have to invoke the tooth fairy twice, meaning dark energy. So evolutionists make jokes about how their model doesn't work unless you invoke the tooth fairy. Meanwhile, the public schools are teaching our children that the Big Bang model is true. There's a serious problem here.
Invoking the tooth fairy. Galaxy formation. A galaxy is a large group of stars. Evolutionists believe galaxies started as a small collection of stars, we mentioned that earlier, then merged into larger and larger collections until galaxies were formed. The problem is, if your model can't make stars, then you can't make galaxies either. According to the Big Bang, there shouldn't be 100 billion or so galaxies in the universe. Even if the stars could be somehow formed, getting galaxies to form from the Big Bang would be a problem. And evolutionary astronomers admit this is true. One evolutionist wrote, "It's always been difficult for astronomers to explain why stars are clumped into galaxies and instead of spread out more uniformly in space. There shouldn't be galaxies out there at all. Even if there are galaxies, they shouldn't be grouped together the way they are." The problem of explaining the existence of galaxies has proved to be one of the thorniest in cosmology. By all rights, they shouldn't be there. Yet there they sit. It's hard to convey the depth of the frustration that this simple fact induces among scientists. Another scientist wrote, "The formation of galaxies and larger scale structure remains TMUPIMA, which stands for the most important unsolved problem in modern astrophysics. Neither a century after the true nature of galaxies was established, their origin and evolution remain great unsolved problems of modern astrophysics." Another thing, the spiral arms that we see in the galaxies, and you can see here on the picture, there's arms that go this way, and they rotate counterclockwise. Think of like a hurricane, you see, where it rotates and spins up. So the spiral arms should not exist if the galaxies are billions of years old. And also think, does a hurricane last a long time? No, they spin up. Think of a skater when she puts her arms in and accelerates, and it'll eventually slow down. That's the same concept we see with these galaxies. They'll spin up, but eventually slow down. So whether they're winding up or unwinding, if the spiral galaxies were really billions of years old, the evolutionists say there should be no recognizable spiral arms, but instead the galaxies should be a collection of star and dust. The spirals should be dissipating. Evolutionists propose all kinds of theories to explain the existence of spiral galaxies, but they continue to look for new solutions to the problem because of the explanations just don't work. And the spiral galaxies are perfectly consistent with a young universe of 6,000 years old. That's why they invent stuff like dark matter, dark energy to throw in there, but we can't even observe that. So here's an example of a spiral galaxy winding. They can't last billions of years. The spiral arms rotate, intersections rotate faster, outer bands slower, and the spiral structure becomes tighter and tighter before it dissipates. At 1 billion years, the galaxy would be twisted beyond recognition, and we wouldn't see these spiral arms. And evolutionists say galaxies are supposedly 10 billion years old. So if the spiral arms decay at 1 billion, that's 10 times the max age due to this theoretical max from the winding problem. But it's consistent with a young universe. Another thing I want to point out, if you look at these edges, you see some blue stars, like tints of blue. Well, blue stars are another problem. And they have formation scenarios that are problematic. Blue stars are the hottest and most luminous star in the universe. And they tend to be the biggest as well. And they have the most fuel. So think the blue star burns fuel very quickly. And they tend to be what's called the SUVs of the cosmos. They have a really big tank, but they have very poor gas mileage. So the maximum age of all those blue stars you saw in that picture cannot be more than 1 million years old. And that's consistent with thousands of years. So the blue stars expend their fuel quickly. They cannot last billions of years. They can only last 1 million years. Here's another short clip from the Institute for Creation Research explaining what I'm talking about, but they give some pictures, so maybe that'll reinforce the thought.
The three bright blue stars that make up Orion's belt look pretty small up in the night sky, but actually blue stars are some of the most massive and brightest stars in the whole universe. Stars burn hydrogen for fuel, and blue stars have a lot of hydrogen. Our sun has enough hydrogen to keep burning for around 10 billion years. Blue stars have much more than that, but they won't last as long because they burn through it so much faster. Many blue stars shine 200 times brighter than our sun because they burn their fuel so quickly. Blue stars are like SUVs. They have a big gas tank, but very poor mileage. And they illuminate all parts of the night sky. How do so many short-lived stars exist in a universe that is supposedly 13.8 billion years old? Secular scientists think that stars constantly form as a result of gas clouds being compressed together, even though none of them have ever seen this. Plus, gas particles and clouds bounce against one another. This outward force far exceeds the inward pulling force of gravity. Blue stars churn through their own fuel so fast that they cannot last billions of years. And based on their observed luminosity, the most massive blue stars cannot last even 1 million years before running out of fuel. If the universe is 13.8 billion years old, as secularists claim, blue stars should not be here anymore. But they are, and we find them all throughout the universe. As God said through his prophet Isaiah, "My hands stretched out the heavens, and all their host I have commanded." Blue stars fit perfectly with the Bible's idea of recent creation. So, next time you see a blue star, think of our Creator, whose hands created the whole universe.
Anybody hear of the blue stars and that point before? No? Okay. That's good. I'm learning some things. Also, believe it or not, the Bible teaches the expansion of the universe. And that is found in several places, but one I would bring up is Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. And it reads, God, or the Who, stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. So when Isaiah talked about this 2,700 years ago, people didn't even know that the universe was stretched out. You couldn't see that far. But the Bible was ahead of science. And Dr. Jason Lyle, I'll show a video of him, where he talks about how the Bible was true, but the scientists of Isaiah's day wouldn't have been able to understand that. The heavens are stretched. So I'll play this video with him discussing that.
People say the Bible's not an astronomy textbook. I know that, but it's the Word of God, and when it touches on astronomy, it's right. God knows how the universe works. He made it after all. I believe the expansion of the universe is taught in Scriptures as well. It says that God stretches out the heavens as a curtain, spreads them out as a tent to dwell in, indicating that God has apparently made the universe a little bigger than it was when He first created it. He stretched it out. And that might have been hard to believe when it was written. Again, Isaiah 700s BC, something like that. Because up until the 1500s, 1600s, around there, most of the scientific experts thought the universe was static and eternal. They thought it was unchanging and could not be changed. It would have been really hard for them to believe it's expanding, and it certainly doesn't look like it's expanding. If you go out tonight, it looks big, and you go out tomorrow night, it looks about just as big. It doesn't look like it's been stretched out. But it was in the 1920s that some astronomers came along, and from measuring redshifts of galaxies, they said, it looks like the universe is being expanded or stretched out. How about that? Something that the Bible speaks of millennia earlier. Very interesting. Now, some people have said, well, wait a minute, Dr. Lau, does this mean that there was a Big Bang? Because if you got all the galaxies moving away from each other, doesn't that mean that they all go back to a point? Does that mean that they exploded into existence 13.7 billion years ago? And the answer is no. Just because something's getting bigger doesn't mean it exploded into existence billions of years ago. Some of you are getting bigger. That doesn't mean you exploded into existence billions of years ago. Not at all. Apparently, God made the universe with some size, and He stretched it out a bit since then. We don't know how much. He doesn't say. But there's no indication that the universe was ever a point, like the Big Bang folks believe. Some people have said, well, at least this confirms the Big Bang, right? Because the Big Bang, didn't it predict that the universe would be expanding? And lo and behold, observations show the universe is expanding. Doesn't that count as a successful prediction? And the answer is no, because the expansion of the universe was discovered in the 1920s. The Big Bang idea, the idea that the universe came from a point, was invented in 1931 as an explanation for that expansion, a secular explanation, really. The inventor of it did believe in God, but he believed that science and God were separate, and he wanted to explain the origin of the universe in natural terms. So it's not a confirmation of the Big Bang, not at all.
Interesting how the Bible was ahead of science. We'll touch more about what he said, the history of the Big Bang, when we bring up the Big Bang topic. Another short video from Spike Pizarros on the early mature galaxies problem, because as they're getting better and better telescopes, they're finding that galaxies are mature the deeper and deeper they go into the universe. They think those billions of years of light, we should see, if we go, that's like going back in time and seeing when these galaxies were just starting to spin up. But what they're finding is they look like the galaxies are close. They're all the same rotation rate. It's almost a proof that that light coming to us is coming instantaneous. And we'll talk about that with the light problem, and we have answers to those.
There's an additional problem that's been getting worse lately. As technology improves, we're able to look farther out into the universe than ever before. The Big Bang model makes predictions about what we should be seeing out there, but the galaxies we're seeing aren't matching the Big Bang's predictions. We can now see galaxies that are so far away they can only be seen by using the world's most powerful telescopes. Evolutionists calculate that these galaxies are so far away that their light would have taken billions of years to get here. Therefore, they figure that when we see these distant galaxies, we're seeing them as they were billions of years ago. In fact, evolutionists believe that as we look farther out, we'll see galaxies as they used to be, farther back in time. So as we look farther and farther out, we would see galaxies as they used to be, closer and closer to the Big Bang. Well, the Big Bang model makes predictions about what these things should look like. It turns out that some of these objects do look different in some interesting ways, but they aren't matching the Big Bang's predictions. Evolutionist astronomers had calculated that galaxies formed 8 to 11 billion years ago. That's because according to the secular model, it takes 3 to 6 billion years for galaxies to form. So, as we started to look farther out into the universe, evolutionists expected to start finding immature galaxies that were still forming. But that's not what has happened. As we've looked farther and farther out, we're discovering mature galaxies at farther and farther distances. This has been called the early mature galaxies problem. We're finding mature galaxies where the Big Bang model says there shouldn't be any. For example, in 2004, astronomers announced the discovery of 300 mature galaxies that are so far distant that evolutionists believe we're seeing them as they were just 3 to 6 billion years after the Big Bang. The problem is that the Big Bang model predicted that only a handful of galaxies could have formed in such a short time. One secular astronomer said, "We expected to find basically 0 massive galaxies beyond about 9 billion years ago, because theoretical models predict that massive galaxies form last. Instead, we found highly developed galaxies that just shouldn't have been there, but are." Another astronomer commented, "It's not quite time for theorists to panic, but we're getting there." Another group announced they had observed a group of galaxies that existed only 2.5 billion years after the Big Bang. But contrary to secular expectations, they were not only massive, but also very old. The astronomer said, "We are really amazed. These are the earliest, oldest galaxies found to date. Their existence was not predicted by theory. We're detecting galaxies we never expected to find, having a wide range of properties we never expected to see." Then the mature galaxy problem got worse again, with the discovery of 5 large galaxies that the Big Bang says shouldn't be there. According to the secular interpretation, we're seeing them as they were just 1.7 billion years after the Big Bang. The report in Science talked about evolutionary models for star formation and complained, "But this process was supposed to take billions of years." It quoted one of the astrophysicists on the team who said, "We have no idea why these galaxies grew so large so soon." Not only that, the Spitzer Space Telescope team has found galaxies which supposedly had already formed just 1 billion years after the Big Bang. Then in 2007, astronomers announced the discovery of galaxies which had already formed just 500 million years after the Big Bang, just 1/2 of 1 billion. The Big Bang model says stars were barely beginning to form this early, yet here are hundreds of billions of them already collected into galaxies. And the discoveries have continued. In 2008, one report said, "The presence of such fully evolved galaxies so early in the life of the cosmos is hard to explain and has been a major puzzle to astronomers studying how galaxies form and evolve." The farther out we look, the more we see that the universe does not match the Big Bang model. Now, I hope I haven't confused you here by talking about these objects having formed millions or billions of years after the Big Bang. I don't believe the Big Bang model. Although most evolutionary astronomers believe in the Big Bang, many are also admitting that the Big Bang has serious problems explaining what we see. For example, a completely satisfactory theory of galaxy formation remains to be formulated. It is rather embarrassing that no one has explained their origins. Most astronomers and cosmologists freely admit that no satisfactory theory of galaxy formation has been formulated. In other words, a major feature of the universe is without explanation. There is something badly wrong with our standard picture of the origin of galaxies. So we should ask, how much can the evolutionary model explain anyway? Now we see that the model also can't explain stars. This means our sun shouldn't exist. Neither should the other stars in the Milky Way. Neither should the stars we see elsewhere. Neither should globular clusters. And neither should galaxies, or clusters of galaxies. And I've just listed the contents of the entire universe. The secular model fails to explain anything we see in space. The universe defies the evolutionary model just because it exists.
And you don't hear that, do you, on mainstream media? All right, so let's see what the Bible teaches, all right? The 3 purposes of the heavens. One is signs and seasons. One is sustaining life. And the third is declaring his glory. So back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, we read, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and days and years." And we're starting to see that right now the sun's getting lower and lower in the sky as we trend towards the winter solstice. So we have the day defined by one Earth rotation, 24 hours. We have the month that's defined by the interaction between the Earth and the Moon. When the Moon rotates around the Earth 1 month. And the year is defined by the Earth rotating around the Sun, 365 days. Also, in the past, before we had modern ways to track things, sailors and farmers used the sun and stars to tell time to navigate their ships for thousands of years before us. Farmers used the heavens for decision support regarding planting and harvesting of their crops. Egyptians knew when to plant their crops by looking for the star Sirius to appear each year. And its annual appearance just before the dawn at the summer solstice, or June 21st, heralded the coming rise of the Nile, upon which the Egyptian agriculture depended. Another is sustaining life, the sun. The sun is crucial to life on our planet. It provides life-sustaining energy that provides food. Plants convert sun energy into sugars and starches, which are eaten by animals and man. And without the sun, the Earth's entire food chain would collapse. Sun also produces oxygen through photosynthesis. Plants use the sun's energy to absorb carbon dioxide and then produce oxygen through photosynthesis. We breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. So without the sun, there would be no source of oxygen for us to breathe. Isn't that amazing? Sun also produces heat. And the sun, and we'll talk a little bit about this, is the proper size and distance from the Earth to provide livable temperatures. And we get into each star or each planet, you'll see how they're unlivable. But we're like in the Goldilocks area. We're just far enough from the sun to get the proper heat, or it doesn't boil us or freeze us, versus the other planets that are away from us. So if the sun was a different size and distance, life would not be possible. And without the sun, the Earth would plunge into a permanent freeze. Remember I said about our galaxy, the Milky Way? There's a picture showing where the sun is in reference to the Milky Way. We're on the right part. We live in the correct part of the Milky Way to sustain life. Why? If we were closer to the middle, Earth would be bombarded with X-rays and gamma rays from the galactic center. If the sun were farther out, its orbital period would no longer match the rotation rate of the Milky Way galaxy, and we would be more likely to drift in our galaxy's spiral arm where radiation is higher. Our sun's orbit is circular. Elliptical orbit would cause drift into the arms. And overall, our sun is just the right type and just the right spot and in just the right orbit to sustain life on Earth. In Isaiah 45:18, it talks about that. For thus says the Lord, who created the heavens and who is God, who formed the earth and made it, who has established it, who did not create it in vain, who formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Also, Jeremiah 33:22 says, the host of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of the sea measured. And it was brought up earlier, the scientists of Jeremiah's day may have ridiculed this teaching because they could only see 3,000 stars with the naked eye. But later we find out that the stars are so numerous we can't even count them. They were wrong and the Bible's right. And the third is Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. What I have a picture up here on the upper left is the Sombrero Galaxy, and the picture on the bottom is actually a nebula. It's called the Cat's Eye Nebula. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, how it looks? And there's so many pictures I'll show later in space that's amazing and declares the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. This one is touching, and Spike talks about declaring God's glory. He talks about the stars, the number, the diversity, and size. You probably heard the saying that no two snowflakes are the same. The billions of snowflakes that fall each year, they're all unique. There's no two people the same. there's no two animals the same. There's no two stars the same, even though there's so many of them. So he'll talk about this. This one goes a few minutes, but it also compares our sun to the bigger suns out there. I think you'll enjoy this.
It says in Psalm 19, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." The universe does this in many wonderful ways. First, the Bible says that God has created so many stars that we couldn't count them any more than we could count the grains of sand on the beaches of the world. The prophet Jeremiah wrote that, "The host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured." At the time he wrote this, though, this would have been considered ridiculous. There are only about 3,000 stars visible to the naked eye. So you can imagine Jeremiah writing this as God inspired him to do so, and then being ridiculed by the best scientists of his day. The best scientists of his day all knew that the stars could be counted because they had done so. But they were wrong, and the Bible is right. Thanks to better technology, we can now see an estimated 100 to 200 billion galaxies.
Billion galaxies.
Each galaxy contains about 100 billion stars. That's about 10 to the 22 stars in total. That's a 1 with 22 zeros after
Watch
it.
this.
That's an incomprehensible number. If you could count one star per second, it would take you over 300 trillion years. This is far beyond human effort, and again we see that the Bible was proven correct, even though for thousands of years, the best available scientific evidence seemed to contradict it. But even though the stars are uncountable, there are still a finite number of them. As Psalm 147 says, "He telleth the number of the stars, he calleth them all by their names."
All by their name.
Again, the Bible correctly refutes
Amazing.
incorrect ideas. From the ancient Greeks all the way into modern times, there have been many scientists and philosophers who taught that the universe was eternal and infinite in size. Today we understand that although the universe is vast beyond our understanding, it is still finite in size, and it had a beginning. The Bible correctly describes our universe. The Bible also says that there is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. For one star differeth from another star in glory. Again, for most of human history, philosophers and scientists would not have agreed with this. Although a few stars show some variation, most of the stars that are visible to the eye don't look very different from each other. But again we see how the Bible gives a correct description of the universe. Thanks to better technology, we now know that stars have a bewildering diversity. Stars are found in various colors: white, blue, red, orange, and yellow. They vary in type, from white, brown, and red dwarfs, medium-sized yellow stars, and blue, red, and orange giants. Some are single, many are in binary pairs, others are found in multiple star systems. Stars vary in brightness, from brown dwarfs shining at less than 1/millionth the brightness of the sun, to R136A1, blazing 8.7 million times brighter than the sun. Stars vary in composition. They have different temperatures. They have different masses. They have variable spot activity. They have different rotation rates. They show different periods of solar cycles. They even differ in how they shine. Some shine steadily, others vary in brightness in regular cycles. There are billions of stars in the universe, in an amazing variety and diversity, and our Lord has named every single one of them. Stars are also found in an enormous variety of sizes. Here again we can catch a glimpse of the glory of the Creator. In our daily lives, it's difficult to perceive the size and scale of the universe. The Earth alone is far bigger than we can really comprehend. Even though there are roughly 7 billion people in the world, the Earth is so big that every person in the world could fit into the state of Texas with more than 1,000 square feet per person. But even at that size, the Earth is small compared to Jupiter, and Jupiter is far smaller than our Sun. Our Sun is so big that you could fit over 1 million Earths inside of it. Yet the Sun is small compared to Sirius A, which is a brilliant blue-white star, the brightest star we can see in the sky. But even Sirius is dwarfed by orange giants like Pollux, Arcturus, and Aldebaran. And even these giants are tiny compared to such stars as Rigel, Antares, and Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse is as wide as 1,180 suns, But even Betelgeuse is dwarfed by the supergiant stars, including VY Canis Majoris, the largest star we know of so far. For perspective, here's a comparison of our Sun to VY Canis
Next to the
Majoris.
largest.
The variety and sizes of stars are enough to humble us before our Creator. But we should also consider how vast is the space in which God has placed them.
Okay, so that gives you the diversity of the stars out there. The message of the heavens. Which model fits the universe? Biblical creation or evolution? Evolutionist says, the truth is that we don't understand star formation at a fundamental level. The Bible says in Psalm 33:6, 8, and 9, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. Evolutionist says, nobody really understands how star formation proceeds. It's really remarkable. Isaiah 40:26 says, lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these things, who brings out their hosts by number. He calls them all by name. Remember, it said, if you were to count each star every second, it would take you hundreds of trillions of years to count them all. Evolutionist says the formation of stars is one of the most fundamental problems in astrophysics. No current model can reproduce all the observations. Isaiah 55:9 says, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Evolutionist says, the universe we see when we look out to its furthest horizons contains 100 billion galaxies. Each of the galaxies contains another 100 billion stars. That's 10 to the 22nd power stars all told. The silent embarrassment of modern astrophysics is that we do not know how even a single one of these stars managed to form. Psalms 147:5 says, great is our Lord and great in power. His understanding is without measure. Evolutionist says, I suspect that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. However, giving some new and unexpected results to the contrary, and some time for some frantic recalculation and theoretical readjustment, I suspect that we could live with Bishop Ussher's value for the age of the earth and sun. I don't think we have much in the way of observational evidence in astronomy to conflict with that. And the last one, spiritual message of the heavens. We'll compare an atheist naturalist versus Christian viewpoints. The atheist says it's very hard to realize that this all is just a tiny part of an overwhelming, hostile universe. It's even harder to realize that this present universe faces a future extinction of endless cold or intolerable heat. The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless to them. Isaiah 44:23, sing, O heavens, for the Lord has done it. Shout joyfully, you lower points of the earth. Break forth into singing, you mountains. Psalm 148:13, let them praise the name of the Lord, for his name alone is excellent. His glory is above the earth and heaven. Carl Sagan, before he died in 1997, said this, our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity and all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. Psalm 121:2, my help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. An atheist said, we are such insignificant creatures on a minor planet of a very average star in the outer suburbs of one of the 100,000 million galaxies. So it is difficult to believe in a God that would care about us or even notice our existence. Psalm 23:1-3, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. And physicist Lawrence Krauss said, We're just a bit of pollution. If you got rid of us, then the universe would be largely the same. We're completely irrelevant. In John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Here's another secularist. I played this, I think, before, but she says that eventually the stars will burn out someday.
You know, it is so tempting. I mean, humans have done this for literally tens of thousands of years, to think of the stars as eternal. The stars will all burn out someday. There's only a certain amount of stellar fuel, of hydrogen. The stars are burning through it. And then the stars, as we know them, will all die out in some trillions of years. And the universe will be dark for the rest of time, whatever that means.
So you can see they have no hope without the Lord. Psalm 8:3-4, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have established, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you attend to him? John 1:3, all things were created through him, and without him nothing was created that was created. Colossians 1:16, for by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they are thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And I'm going to end with this last video. I know we're over time, but this touched me, and I was telling my family that almost brought a tear to my eye, but it goes 2 minutes. But what he's going to do, he's going to use the Hubble Ultra Deep Field, and imagine holding a grain of sand and looking up, and let that grain of sand block your view from the universe. And that's how small of an area he's going to talk about.
To catch the tiniest glimpse of what this means, look at this photograph. This is called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field. It's a long exposure photo taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. Except for these few stars, every other object, blob, and tiny speck of light you see is a faraway galaxy. This photograph contains over 10,000 separate galaxies with a beautiful variety of sizes, shapes, and colors. And each galaxy contains 100 to 200 billion stars. Yet this photo is of a tiny portion of the sky. How much of the sky does this represent? This entire photograph is the amount of sky that would be blocked from your view if you held a grain of sand above your head at arm's length. Now extend what you see here to the entire sky, not only from horizon to horizon, but also below the earth, all the way around under your feet. And we are overwhelmed with what the Lord has done. But despite being the creator of this vast universe, the Bible tells us that Jesus made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. The creator of this awe-inspiring universe humbled himself more than we can possibly comprehend to save us from our sins and to buy for himself a precious bride for all eternity. In doing this, he has glorified himself by demonstrating infinite compassion, infinite mercy, and giving a sacrifice of infinite value, offering it freely for us. In the words of the famous hymn, "Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my Lord, should die for me?" As we gaze out into a universe full of wonder, this is the true message we must remember. In more ways than we can possibly understand, truly the heavens declare the glory of God.
So before I close, any questions? Galaxies, I know. And there's probably even more than that.
To me, how science has to contradict itself to keep the arguments that they have. It's like, well, one of the basic understanding of thermodynamics is entropy.
Yep.
And entropy tells us that things will become more disorganized, not organized.
Yep.
So the gas will not compress by itself. No way.
Nope.
It will always spread.
It always.
It will tend to a state of lower energy, not higher energy, unless something no way things could, their theory could happen without an external source of energy.
Yep.
And they talk about magnetic fields. From where? From what?
I know.
Right?
Yep.
Who create those magnetic fields?
Yep.
So they were created by electricity, and who created those electrons coming from where?
Yep.
Right? So it's unbelievable. So they have to go against their physics laws to create the physics, their theory. It's unbelievable.
Yep. They have to go against physics, and we'll talk about that in depth. And they have to violate either law, the entropy, second law of thermodynamics, or the first law of thermodynamics, where it says matter is neither created nor destroyed. So they have to violate one of those because they won't believe that there's a creator outside of it that created everything. That's it. Thanks for your attention.